see one question. It says, what role do you see that the hip hop culture plays in this issue, the sexualization of young girls and exploitation when musicians like Cardi B capitalize on self-objectification in songs like WAP? I think you may find differing opinions on this topic, for sure. I feel mixed bags. I both feel like songs like that can be empowering. And at the same time, I can hear what you're describing in terms of sexualization of women in music, especially as I don't know if anybody is up to date with what is happening with T.I. and Tiny right now. And there's a conversation with if what they are doing relates to human trafficking in any way, but I don't know if any of the other panelists have thoughts on that. I can both hear how the music. I love Cardi B. I think she's empowering. She's great, but at the same time, I also can hear the other side. I think it's just a matter of who's listening and what message you receive from it. I don't know.
Yeah, to sort of answer that question, I feel like it's very important to distinguish between subjectification and objectification. I think it just depends on what lens you're looking at it. Normally, like for example, objectification, you see a lot of male rappers rapping about a lot of the sex that they have, the women that they get, and they just put all of these women in their videos and sort of push that narrative. Whereas with Cardi B, I think she's with that song WAP, I think she's sort of flipping the narrative and taking back or like empowering herself, as Andolyn was saying, and sort of saying that her sexuality is her own. So objectification, I feel, is when somebody takes advantage of that sexuality and uses it to further their own narrative or image. But subjectification is when you take back control of that narrative. And specifically with the T.I. and Tiny situation, as Andolyn was saying, and R. Kelly as well, how that pertains to the adultification of Black girls is a lot of people, it doesn't get a lot of play. It doesn't end up being, trending on Twitter. It doesn't, in our own communities, we regard those girls as fast. I know when I was watching a Surviving R. Kelly documentary, they were saying that people were selling that tape like at swap meets. And so just the way that we're able to continuously consume the trauma of Black girls, whether it be from a tape like that or be from like a major motion picture where a Black woman is a drug addict or a maid or whatever, it's just become so palatable in today's society. And I think we do need to address that in our society as well.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a big want to say that trafficking is happening everywhere else, but it is happening here. It is happening in your backyards. It is probably happening right in front of you. But because of what we're saying, the biases, the stereotypes, how we view situations, who we put the onus and the blame on, that all changes how we get involved and we get engaged. And I see the question here. I think it said, what are some prevention interventions that may help people become aware or challenge their biases? So I'll open that up to you all as well. Definitely the things that I said, and I think also just having more conversations, and again, doing that check-in with yourself when you say certain things, thinking about how you frame certain things, who you put the blame on, all of those different sort of angles. Like when we were talking about, the language of saying like, who did you have sex with, versus realizing that a child under the age of 18 cannot consent to sex. So therefore it is not sex, it is rape. So by changing language is very, very important. And I think that's one of the main things that you can do.
There's also a question from Yasmin that says, why do you believe that individuals in the anti-trafficking field and those not in the field want to ignore our country's history when it comes to slavery and how human trafficking are related, as if slavery was not a model for what is played out right now? I just think sort of for the reason why human trafficking as a whole is underreported and not really talked about. It's an uncomfortable subject. For the same reason why people don't want to talk about slavery. But I think because the two are so interlinked, especially with Black girls and how Black girls were bought and sold and raped, and this is exactly what is happening now. I think it's ignorance is usually deemed as bliss, but I guess we're in a society right now, and I hope we're coming to a reckoning where we can no longer ignore something like that. I did want to say, though, one of the modules that I went to for the Truth Conference a couple weeks ago, they said something about not calling human trafficking, I think, modern day slavery, because in a way that sort of like erases uh, what happened, as if modern day slavery is not, happening now with how the prison system is organized and everything. And so I think um, just changing the language, as Andolyn said, but also really confronting the history of this country and being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations is how we'll be able to come to some type of reckoning.
Thanks, Reagan. I'm going to take a question that I see on, it says, what is your take on legalizing sex work when so many marginalized people end up doing it for survival and enter it not by choice? So I'm just going to answer what the stance Fair Girls has on this issue. We take a partial decriminalization stand where Fair Girls is for decriminalizing the act of the sex being sold, but not the act of the sex being bought. So it is a halfway stance. And the reason that we do that is because a lot of the survivors that we work with do not agree with us taking a full-on stance, just taking into consideration the violence, the trauma, and everything that they went through from the buyer's end. So the survivors that we work with do not agree with taking a full-on stance, but we understand that it is a very controversial topic, and a lot of organizations that advocate for consensual sex workers really take on that full-on legalization, decriminalization stance. So I definitely agree with the fact that there are a lot of marginalized populations that end up doing it for survival, and we need to decriminalize the selling, at least, so they don't end up being criminalized, because it then enters that continuous cycle. But that is the stance that Fair Girls take. So if there's anything else that you all would like to add for that.
Yeah, I would just say I think I support the legalization from the empowerment piece, and like Jasmine was saying, the difference between being sold versus being bought. And yet part of what we know is like there can often be blurred lines within the two. And just because a person is at one stage at one point doesn't mean that it can easily slip to the other at another. And so if you are curious, we do Human Trafficking 101 trainings that go into this topic a lot deeper, and also talk about like the differences between different parts of human trafficking or different pimps, different language. So that would definitely be something like connect with Jasmine about if you would like that done. And I think somebody asked about Michigan, but since everything's virtual right now, I'm sure that's something we could definitely look at. So I would definitely say, reach out to Jasmine if that's something that you would be curious about, going more into details about what human trafficking looks like globally and specifically in the United States in different languages.
On that note, someone wanted to have your full names and contact info, so I'm going to pull this up just in case anyone else wanted that.
Yes, and unfortunately, I do have to head out, but thank you all for joining us today. I put my stuff in the chat, so feel free to reach out if you have any more questions, but thank you all.
And one other thing that I wanted to mention is that we have added an event in partnership with the PG County Human Trafficking Task Force and Safe Center. We are going to have a lived experienced expert speaker that'll be speaking on her experience. Here is the link for you to register. I will be sending out an email, but this is an opportunity for us to learn from a survivor, someone that has lived through this, someone that has a story of resiliency, of healing and strength that we all have a lot to learn from. So again, I'll send the link in the chat. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to us. I will also add my email here. You will all be receiving the recording, the slides. So thank you so much. And a virtual round of applause to our panelists today who did